Yeah, we've been on the market now for, I think, just under 2 months, 3 or 4 days. And we have some of our supporters here. Just a quick disclaimer there, standard disclaimer. Introduction to us as Serval Resources. I'm sure there's quite a few people who don't know very much about us here in the room. But we are in 3 jurisdictions in Africa, 2 of the best and probably the 3rd best, which is Namibia, Botswana, and the Ivory Coast. We have some excellent shareholders. In fact, one of our shareholders is in the room and was just speaking to you before. But we also have KCL Investments, which vended the assets to us, which is really run by Philip Richards of Rab Capital. We have Ian Stalker and Neil Herbert, who I've worked with extensively in the past and are well-known mining entrepreneurs. And we have Capital Drilling. Jamie Boynton put some money in and is a strong supporter of ours. So we have a very, very strong shareholder register of some of the best mining entrepreneurs that you can find in the world today. The core assets really are Namibia and Botswana. We have very interesting assets in the Ivory Coast, but they are more early stage than what we have in Namibia and Botswana. In the room here, we've got a couple of our members of the management team if you want to speak to them later, but Richard James is in the back, our CFO. He and I worked together almost 20 years ago when I was helping them float a business in Zambia. So we have people who are far, far more experienced than what you would expect for a small company that we are at the moment. And as you can see, we listed on AIM and raised some money. So the key assets here, pointer. So the key assets are here in Botswana. And here in Namibia. These 2 regions are some of the most prolific copper regions in the world. Particularly, this is a very new producing region with MMG and Sandfire, probably combined valuation today of those assets around about 10 billion, I would guess. The assets that MMG picked up, they paid 1.9 billion for about 3 years ago. These have been exceptionally good acquisitions for both of those companies, and we are in very, very good company with our licenses around them. And this is called the Kalahari Copper Belt. It's a sedimentary hosted copper belt. Sedimentary hosted copper belts today are really quite vogue, particularly because of Robert Friedland and what he's achieved at Kamoa-Kakula in the Ivory Coast, and the fact that most of the porphyries are very well picked over today. And then this is a relatively new region. It's an extension of the Central African Copper Belt, which runs into Zambia and through the DR Congo. So these are, very, very prolific, and particularly in this area, there's an enormous amount of interest from the majors. We have NDAs with 5 or 6 of them, all of them looking at what we're doing as we begin our program. So looking specifically here in Namibia, you can see we have a very large land package. It's almost 800 square kilometers. And we have multiple targets that we are starting to work on now. We have guys in the field, myself and Richard. Were there about 10 days ago doing the first pass of some of those key assets that we have. And you can see some of the historic work that has been done here. We're taking a little bit of a step backwards and doing more of a systematic process than what was done previously. It was done by a private company. They did what they could with the limited funds they had. And it was mostly about maintenance of the licenses and making some limited discoveries. So we will be working across these different sites and also 6998 over the next weeks and months to do the basic exploration that needs to be done so you can move forward towards drilling. So it's geological mapping, and what that means is our young men and women who are in the field, they walk across all of the land and they assess what the geological features are and what the rocks are so that we can get an interpretation of where the contact is between, in the sedimentary hosted basin, between the shale and the overlying sandstone, which is where you get the reduction process, which is the precipitation out of copper from the fluid flows, which are, a billion years ago. We will then do a high-resolution ground magnetics. This helps you see into the subsurface and can tell you, it can identify the difference between the shale and the sandstone unit, which is where you want to be looking. We will continue that with soil sampling, and then finally we will have our maiden drilling program. So we have in this Kaoko Basin, you can see just here, this is where all of the geological mapping will happen. We were down here at Matapati. We were here at the Horseshoe. We were here looking at Ochizon, Gombe East and West. And we were up here looking at, this is a small-scale, semi-professional artisanal pit that was dug in the past. And all of these areas are extremely prospective areas. And you can see the amount of work, and the guys are in the field now doing that. Just a little bit of, it's an extremely beautiful area. This is one of our prospects, and looking down from the hill into it. And this is an example of the samples you can find at surface. This is the oxide material, not the primary sulfide material. Obviously, this is much, much higher grade, and some of our competitors in the region will tell you, these are high grades. But what we're really looking for is this is indicators of where we want to find the contact and be able to build strike length, width, and depth, and that'll give us volume. And if you want to read SP Angel's note, you'll have an idea of what they think is the sort of target for the scale there. So coming over to Botswana, this is a much better known currently, even though it's a relatively new area. The discoveries were really made only in the 2010s. These Sandfire and MMG, they purchased the Australian companies that did the initial exploration. They were very lucky to buy them at quite depressed prices, particularly Sandfire, which is down here on the Moteo. But copper was a completely different price at the time. And I mean, this has turned into an absolutely fabulous asset for them. Our key licenses are this 235 complex, which we call the Sweetthorn Pan, and then the 232 complex. We did some work on this as part of our, before the acquisition, but we operated the company for the private company. And you'll see that actually this is quite interesting. And then this is the Kobe discoveries. And we did some work on both these blocks, and that showed us some quite interesting features. But look, it's really about our proximity to it's not so much about, the MMG is here, but it's about the proximity to the right part of the belt. It's really, really key, because you're looking again for a contact in Huacopan Dakar Formation, which is green shale and a red sandstone. And at this point, if anybody can remember their chemistry, when you change the pH of the solution, which is copper in it, the blue crystals appear. And that is effectively what happens in nature in this area. And for the oil and gas people in the room, they think it's actually an old stacked reservoir where the hydrocarbons are gone, through which the copper and silver laden fluids passed, which then crystallize out at that reduction boundary. So moving forward, go back quickly. So we're working in 235 and 232 at the moment. I think the guys are on site as of today. The work that they're doing here, it's a little bit different, because you're covered by between 20 and 80 meters of sand. There's no outcrop. You can't map. Everything has to be done by geophysics, and then you can do some soil sampling in the cone of where the copper ions have been transported over the last 150 million, 250 million years by the rebounding of the big sea that was Botswana. So 232 has not got a lot of work done on it previously, so we are doing some key magnetics and then some AMT. 235 had drill holes in it previously in 2010 and 11 by the predecessor to Sandfire. There was some discovery in that, but we think that the regional geophysics they used was just too crude or too coarse. The spacing is about 200 meters between the lines, and so that gives you potentially up to 400 meters. So we're going to go directly to geophysics. So these are as you can see, these are all of the MMG either discoveries or operating mines, and all the features run this way. And you're looking for these contacts, and you're looking for a nose where you can have where the fluids can accumulate and create greater width. I've talked about what we're going to do there. This is specifically the work. So this is the Sweet Thorn Pan. You can see the nose here. Unfortunately, a little bit of it's out of our block here, but we have both limbs of it. This was drilled. We think they drilled just a little bit off of where they need. If you think about a stack reservoir, maybe 10 feet of pay and then another 8 feet of pay and then 30 feet of pay. We think that this geophysics was shot by the government in the 80s and 90s, and it's just it was airborne and it's just a bit too coarse. So we're going to cover this block with geophysics, and then we are going to shoot just some lines across. It's a very long block. It's about 25 kilometers long. We're going to shoot some initial ones to see what the features are like in that, because the geophysics is particularly good at the moment. And then we'll come back with some results on that. This block in particular, I'm very interested in because I think that we can accelerate that to drill it quite quickly. And if you think that this is 4 kilometers, we did some numbers. If it's 4 with a hinge, 8, maybe 150 meters of depth, 30 meters of width at 2.8 ton specific gravity, it's around about 100 million tons. Now, we have to prove this up. We'll make it happen. But you've got a decent sized target there. 100 million tons today at an MRA is probably worth about $300 million or something like that. 82 and 61, we will not be doing that much work on them. We did our work on this initially. We will once we do the work in 232 and 235, we will assess all of them and rank these opportunities for which ones we want to drill. But I wanted to show you specifically what we shot. We shot some geophysics over this block here, 232, and this is an example of what we would expect to see when we do the full geophysics. And you can see the resolution. You can see the resolution is much, much better, and it shows this feature didn't show whatsoever in the regional geophysics. This is a secondary priority for us, but it's very, very interesting that, first of all, the offset is significant compared to the original stuff. The detail is much better, and you can see the contact. And we also found out that the Kalahari sand depth here in the northern part of the block is only 20 to 30 meters. It was postulated in most of this block it's at the end of the belt, and it would be much, much deeper. It is as you go to the south. It's 80 meters down here, and further down where some of our other competitors in the region are, it's 150 meters. That's problematic. It's really too deep to be able to mine it other than with the ISL. Just very briefly, we do have to do some work in the Ivory Coast for our license maintenance. It's an extremely interesting opportunity. I was the chairman of a gold company in the region. We picked up this license because of that. And we will do some of the basic work that we need to do. And then we'll most likely be looking to talk to some partners, one of whom is very close with the last speaker. And they're very, very interested, very knowledgeable on the Ivory Coast. If you're from Kalgoorlie, if you're still here or not, the West Australians understand this region very, very well. And they're looking for analogs to Carrapateena and Olympic Dam, because these are postulated to be IOCG. And so this is the work that we will be doing. Again, it'll be geophysics in this region. And this is the thesis. These are the Archean Proterozoic boundary. It's exactly what some of the people we've spoken to are interested in. We're right on that boundary. Odiene, which is a very, very good discovery, announced its maiden resource, 1.7 million ounces at 1.45, I think, grams. We are not looking for gold, but we know there is gold in the system because of the work we did. We're looking for copper, and we think that where we are is very prospective. Ivory Coast doesn't have any copper mines really at the moment. They only have gold mines, but there is a lot of work going into this, and there's quite some interest, particularly, as I mentioned, from West Australians. So this, you can see, we put this up really just so you can see that there's a lot of news flow that will be coming. We will be generating a lot of interesting results over the next weeks and months here as we get into our program. And obviously, once we've completed the first part of the program, it's been fully budgeted and fully approved by the board. One of the members of the board is here, the chairman, if you want to talk to him about that. But we've fully budgeted. Everything is costed for the first part of the program, and this is the first part of the program in this section here. So you should look forward to quite a bit of news from us over the news flow over the next weeks and months, which we would hope will reflect in the share price as we move forward with our exploration program. I don't know if I really need to speak about it. I know there's some people in the room who are not mining people, but the thesis on copper really is twofold. It's one part supply and one part demand. On the supply side, we have seen falling supply, and we've had some unfortunate force majeure events which have taken supply out of the market that advanced the date at which we went out of balance. And at the same time, you have the new energy transition. So all these electric vehicles that people are thinking about buying use significant amounts of copper. And then I don't believe it's really the data centers themselves. It's more really the power supply to that, which is enormous. And we pick up our phones, and when we AI something, we don't realize that immediately that is millions and millions of operations happening in the server, and all that has to be served by power. When you combine that probably with India doing a significant build out of its power infrastructure, that's why people are bullish on copper, and that's why there was a lot of buying at the end of last year, pushing it from 8,500 to 13,200 today. We've seen it over 14,000. So that's a presentation. We have a few appendices slides if you want to see who the team is and the board, but we are in the throes of our exploration program now, and you should be looking forward to quite a lot of interesting news flow coming from the company.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you. And the chairman is wearing a very elegantly handwritten name badge, because I saw him doing it. So glad you put the shareholders up pretty early. I feel as though I've grown up with Ian Stalker and Neil Herbert, major shareholders in the company. They like to be associated with success, and they like to make money. I do know that they're chief executives and chairman of their own businesses as well. So do they boss you around, or is it that they just leave you alone?
I've actually been on a number of boards with both Ian and Neil in the past, and they came to me and asked me they had a problem child company, and they said, "Can you fix it?" I looked at it and said, "I can fix it, but what am I allowed to do?" And they said, "You can do whatever you want to do." I said, "Right, we're doing copper." Been looking at copper assets for about 18 months to 2 years. Prior to that, we'd done gold, quite successful in gold, and then we were looking at copper. I feel that copper follows gold a little bit, if you look back to the 70s, you'll see that it's quite inflation-proof as well. It rises with because it's not like nickel or cobalt that can be substituted for each other. Copper can't really be substituted for anything else, so it's sort of inflation-proof. And that's why we are in the phase of wanting to build resources. What happens in the mining industry, for people who know this industry, is the majors they go and splurge, then they have to do capital control, and they run down their resources, and all of a sudden they're like, we need to buy something. We're not quite there. Gold is happening. We're not quite there in copper, but if you look forward maybe 18 months or 2.5 years, they will be arriving. They're already talking to us now. We need to build our resource. And at that point, that's when they will have to, pay up significantly to buy. There's some transactions happening now.
Very good. And just remember all the NDAs that Robin's had to sign. Okay, any questions for Robin? Okay, you can ask him about his thesis for copper.
Hi. You mentioned your NDAs in Namibia. Have you got NDAs in Botswana as well?
Yeah, we've got a couple in. How I would characterize it is, in Namibia, it's the majors because they want to replicate Kamoa-Kakula. So I can't say any names, but it's very large companies. In Botswana, it's more mid-tier, 5 to 10 billion type companies who missed out on buying either MMG, maybe had a bid for that from Barclays, or missed out with Sandfire. And they're looking that they want to either enter the copper market or they have some smaller operations somewhere else and they want to follow along with us, maybe JV with us, or put some capital in through the exploration program so that they have a good stake when we come to making a discovery. So they're slightly different, but yes, we do have some NDAs.
Okay, I've got a part two question, if you don't mind. MMG are obviously the main player there. They've got their exploration and development budget agreed last year.
Yeah.
They then got it in place beginning of this year.
Yeah.
What do you think it's going to take before they pull the trigger?
I don't know. I'm not the CEO of MMG, and it's a large company. But as far as I know, they are pulling the trigger, and the work has already started. But they've
started development. They've started the production development.
Yeah.
But they are looking at people around them. I just wonder what it's going to take for them to actually get their arse in gear and actually start making some acquisitions.
Oh no, they won't make acquisitions here. I don't think. I think it's their competitors. Like Sinomine, things like that, who are, if you're talking about the Chinese, they're mandated by the state effectively to be in control of certain of these metals and minerals, and some of the private companies, who are still closely connected with government, they want to come in and build a position. That's the kind of people that are looking. If I can go back, MMG doesn't need to acquire anybody. All of the pink is their land. I mean, they have a massive land position. If anything, they're in a better position to defend their land position because they're spending $1 billion to expand from 60,000 to 110,000. The government of Botswana is quite happy with them because diamond revenues have fallen off a cliff, and they are really short of. It's not a big part of the economy, but it's a very big part of tax take. Diamonds provided about 30% of tax take in Botswana. And that is maybe halved or something like that. So you're now short of 15% of your tax revenue. These tax revenues the royalty revenues, and the tax take is rising. They're very, very happy that they're going to go to 110,000 because whatever 5% royalty on that at $13,000 a ton, that helps to fill that hole. But they're less happy with Sandfire. I would say, this is arm wave, but there's probably 8 to 10 more mineable occurrences in the belt, maybe more than that, maybe 12, and they want those into production as quickly as possible because the turnaround here from exploration to production was really short, maybe 8 years. Most mines are 16 years or whatever, it's a really long time. This was very, very quick. Botswana has a really well organized and qualified Department of Mines, and it's well staffed, so they could, you can look at your mine plan, and you'll get I can't remember how long they have for it, 6 months or whatever it is. They don't usually. And maybe they're a few weeks late, but they do it in time. In Botswana, they're good. If you're ready to go and you deliver a good full feasibility study and EIA, they'll give you your mining license and they'll let you break ground quickly. And that was shown with Mateo and Khoemacau because they were quick. They want more mines here because they need tax revenue badly.
So it's good of you to do a compare and contrast. So my final question is about comparing and contrasting. Is which existing copper deposits do you believe are the best geological analogues, the best sort of comparisons to what you're hoping to find?
Well, that's a good question. Here, obviously, the analog is what MMG has. This end of it's a little tiny bit different down here, not completely, but obviously for us, the analog is MMG. And in Namibia, there isn't really a proper analog yet. The analog is what's happening in Zambia and then in the DR Congo, and that's why there's so much interest. Because I didn't explain it, and we only have a limited amount of time tonight. But this area was a closed military district for 100 years or something like that, from 1890 to 1991. And then it was closed military district in the end. Prior to that, it was closed because they believed there was diamonds on the coast, and then they kept it closed because there was a shipwreck on the coast, and it took them 6 weeks to rescue them, and they didn't want people in there. They wanted the Himba people who live here. They want them to not be disturbed. So this area, that's why it's systematically and chronically underexplored compared to down here below Etosha in the Tsumeb belt. It's very well explored. In fact, the mines are mostly worked out.
Robin, thank you for your encyclopedic knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you.